Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now, I've released this video a little bit earlier than I would have done normally, and of course we're going to be talking about Trey and his lost chapter that's coming up, but we also got a little revision on Serah's LD that's global exclusive, so I thought I'd touch on that as well, and that's why I've decided to release the video a little bit early, so that anyone who doesn't have that information can kind of look at that as well. So if you'd like to learn more about Trey, Serah's new reworked LD, and the event that comes along with Trey, then of course stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of the social media links in the description box below. As I've said in my last video, I'm going to be taking a week off from streaming, etc. over the next week after my Final Fantasy IV stream this evening. So I'll be back next week and I'll have plenty of content still to do in Dissidia, I'm sure. But you can catch me normally streaming 5 times a week and obviously doing every Opera Omnia event as it comes out, Final Fantasy XIV twice a week, and my FF Count Up every Friday night. And I've also got a giveaway planned that I haven't quite finished yet, but if you've been looking at my Twitter and my social media recently, you might have an idea of what it is, and I'm really hoping that people enjoy it, as it's something that's quite personal, and I hope that people will really love it. With Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Corellian, who has Hilda from FF14 as their avatar on their title card, which is a nice, unique one. It was quite fun to make this card, so thank you for that. And if you would like a title card made just for you, just like Corellian has, as well as plenty of other benefits, including exclusive content, being a part of the Would You Pull polls, being a part of voice chats that we all do, and many other benefits, that perhaps you might want to consider joining Patreon yourself and supporting the channel further. Thank you very much in advance if you decide to do that. Then, of course, don't forget to check out all the other content creators out there for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia and all of these wonderful websites that I use in my research, and I think you should too, when it comes to progressing throughout the game. So first things first, before we actually move on to Trey or his lost chapter, I'm actually going to return a little bit to talk about Serah. Now last night, as I said in the Serah video, there is a chance that something was going to happen to Serah's LD. And it did. I didn't think it was likely, but it did happen. Now Serah's LD board got an extension so that when the enemy party has 6 or more debuffs on it, party bravery damage is increased by 30% and HP damage is increased by 20%. Now this does make her significantly more desirable than she was to begin with, because if we've seen anything from the likes of Balthea or Cecil or even Aerith, any kind of percentile damage buff is very powerful and continues to be so for a long time. So I think that for those of you who are big fans of Serah, then yeah, she's definitely worth your resources, a lot more than she was. However, I will not go too heavily on this banner. I have been burned by, well, Vincent in the past, because I thought, well, you know, I still don't think Vincent's that bad, but that being said, I think that because she's got this extra buff, it doesn't excuse the rest of her kit. She's got some really powerful, like, poison debuffs, like, in fact, it's one of the strongest in the game. She's got some really lovely auras as well, so if you like auras that are, like, strictly attack max bravery and percentile, she actually has Balthea beat in a lot of ways on that front. So she's a nice upgrade to Balthea in a lot of ways. But in this day and age, because characters like Aerith and Cecil exist, and they provide healing and stuff like that. Yes, obviously Cecil is wholly locked and there are like missions that lock him out. But in the ones that he's not locked out of, I'm more than likely going to take him because he has stronger offensive capabilities than Serah does and has the Holy Enchant in Peril to make up the difference for the attack auras and things like that. And he also has a burst if you wanted to use that. I don't have it, but other people do. And then with Aerith, I really enjoy the fact that she just locks like buffs and debuffs out all together, and she does what Balthea does but differently. So I think between Serah and Aerith, there's a lot less need for Balthea, and if you don't have any of those characters, then yeah, you should be pulling on Serah. But as much as I think that having Serah is really nice, like I've done a few ticket pulls, didn't get her, did the free pull, didn't get her, I'm not going to cry about it if I don't have her now. And probably I might go back to it after Trey and see how he treats me, because I'll spoil this for you now in advance. He's a lot more wanting of my resources than Serah currently is. But if I found places to put her in future missions, because that is how I think people should be planning their pulls the whole time. And I'm sure I've said it many times in the past, but you need to think about where you're going to use these characters, not go in necessarily with blind fandom, apart from if they're your favorites, and how you pull is not up to me. But for my planning, I tend to pull on characters that I think, yes, I'm going to use this in this, and this. So therefore, I think that because there was no plan to use Serah originally, you don't necessarily need to have her in the future. But she's definitely a lot better than she would have been if she didn't get that global buff. Okay, so now that we've got Serah talked about and out of the way, let's focus on the actual new banner that's coming along, which is going to be Trey. Now, Trey's banner comes along with Quistis and Fran EX, and obviously all of Trey's kit, including his brand new LD, and also features Ishtola's burst, and only her burst. Now, if you've not used Trey before, I've actually not used Trey before because I never got his EX the first time around, but he's actually pretty fabulous. Like, he's got a lot going for him. In terms of off-turn damage, now I talk about off-turn damage a lot on this channel, and there's a very good reason for that. It's because it's very, very powerful, and Trey does it in absolute droves with just his regular skills, and his LD is going to actually compound that even further. So what he does is that he, with both of his regular skills, so Raining Arrows and Dynamite Arrow, he places traps on the enemy or that aren't necessarily triggered the same way as other traps. So Raining Arrows is triggered every time a turn is taken, whether it be yours or theirs. And then Dynamite sort of reduces a duration by, it lasts for 2 turns, and then when it expires, it explodes. Then the other thing you have to bear in mind with Trey as well is that when you don't use one of his skills, his other skills charge up by 1. So he has up to 2 charges on each of his skills, and this includes his HP plus, which I'll get to when we cover his EX. But they are stronger, and in the case of Raining Arrows, last longer if they haven't been used in the previous turn. So he'll start with a charge on all of his skills, but so whichever one you choose to use first, more than likely the LD, to be honest, because then you'll get charge 2 on everything. Anything you didn't use then goes up by a charge. So then what you want to do is kind of cycle around his skills so that you're using the strongest versions of each of them and try not to use the weaker versions of them. But like I said, you get Arrow Shower, which does a battery as well, so you get a nice amount of stuff from that. You get splash damage every turn for up to 3 turns from Raining Arrows, which is really good. And then with Dynamite Arrow, you get a Brave HP attack come off of that expires after 2 turns. So it's all lovely stuff. You get really, you just get a lot of off-turn damage from him, and that's before we've even looked at his EX. His C65 also recovers one of each of his skills, so for those of you who like using Onion Knight or Onion Knight's Call, then Trey is another one of those lovely characters that benefits very heavily from that. Now, this actually isn't the main draw of Trey's kit up until this point. Trey's EX is actually very, very powerful. It's so what you get from this is you get a 5-hit AoE Brave HP attack that triggers multiple times, so you get 2 HP dumps out of it. But you also get a framed debuff called Fatal Arrow for 3 turns. Now, Fatal Arrow means that any bravery attack that hits that enemy will instantly break it. So Trey is not only the king of, off-turn damage, but he also instant breaks things regularly. Bear in mind that obviously they're going to get tapped by these off-turn damages, and therefore Trey works very well with off-turn damage characters like Celeste and Furion as well for this reason, but they're just going to get instantly broken. And Fatal Arrow means that they take more damage while they're broken as well, so you actually get a percentile damage increase at the same time as well. And then you start the match with the EX maxed out. So actually, when I say you use the LD early, you don't actually have to. You can use the EX, and then you've got the skills charge, and then you can use the LD, and then you can go back to the skills afterwards. Because you start with Raining Arrows and Dynamite Arrow at charge level 1 already. And then, like I said earlier, you get a HP attack plus that charges up as well. That gives you a Brave gain, followed by a 3-hit Brave HP attack with significant Brave overflow. So that's a nice kind of off-turn thing that you can do with it. Now, to look at his LD just kind of adds more of what he already does, but that is not a read on him in any way, shape, or form. after giving him LD boards and everything like that, he does a 3-hit Brave HP attack that is inflicted 3 times, so that's multiple HP dumps. So if you're worried about HP dumps with Trey, don't, because he's got so much off-turn damage, so much battery, like he batteries when he does a lot of them, so Raining Arrows batteries as well. You've got, you just have loads of stuff that is going to trigger HP attacks, and even his EX and his LD trigger multiple HP attacks at the same time. He gains bravery back from a lot of his stuff, and then you get splash damage off of this, and you get another frame debuff called Fire Shield, which is an actual trap, kind of like Emperor's, kind of like Furion, Stellar's. This one triggers after the enemy turn. So this one increases your bravery, so you get a battery off of this as well. Then you get a double HP dump trap that then gives him bravery back after you're done. And as a debuff, it also gives you sap, and increases the bravery damage that they would take even further, which is fantastic. And you get 4 uses of this, which is also fierce, and the Fire Shield lasts for 6 turns, so it's a decent level length of trap as well. And combining this with all the other off-turn damages that he can do, the fun thing with Trey as well is that he doesn't actually inflict all that many debuffs himself. He does most of his stuff through special effects. Fire Shield is a debuff, that's a debuff. And Fatal Arrow is a debuff, but neither Dynamite nor Raining Arrows is one, so you don't have to worry too much about that, and therefore you can pair him up really well with other off-turn damage dealers, like the aforementioned Celeste and Furion. So therefore you've got plenty of ways of dealing off-turn damage with Trey, while you've got the ability to instant break things at will. Trey keeps himself safe by batterying with most of his stuff. He's just really good. I just think that he's one of these characters that, because he's not a popular character, he's gonna get overlooked a fair amount, and honestly I think you'd be remiss to just completely overlook this character. In terms of call abilities, I actually really like Trey for this as well, because you get the Dynamite effect off of Dynamite Arrow, which is kind of nice. You get, you know, Brave HP attack with splash damage, Dynamite triggers on all enemies. It's a half decent damaging attack, but given what regular calls you use, you tend not to use them as much as... You're not gunning for them as much as you're gunning for the LD call. But Firewall does most of what Firewall does. You know, you get the multiple HP dumps. You get 4 turns of Fire Shield as well, which has the double HP dump on the Fire Shield trap. But let's not also forget that Fire Shield does have sap and the actual Brave damage percentile buff as well. So therefore you're getting a good amount of damage dealing from Firewall. So in a situation where you can't necessarily take Jack because the enemies like their turns go on for too long, or they're very quick like Trey's bosses are, then Firewall is quite a nice alternative to that, because you're going to get turns of extra damage during their turns as well as your own. I don't think it's as absolutely must have as some out there, but I do think it's a really, really good one to have. And then in terms of his LD boards, like I said, it just increases the number of HP dumps that Firewall has. Fire Shield then gets its second HP dump and increases the Brave gains. And then in terms of his high armor, he has Attack Keystone, which is... I like Attack Keystone on most characters. Trey isn't particularly known for capping his damage output out, but in the right situation, he can actually be very good for and is perfectly capable of capping it. Like I said, Celeste is a really good option for this, because not only does she compound his off-turn damage with her own, but she also has a little bit of aura on there. She also gives him Ice Enchant in Peril, which increases his damage even further. I also think Aranea is a really good pairing with Trey, and because of Vital Crusher, because and the fact that she re-breaks and she gets all of this stuff off at the same time, crit damage being guaranteed, crit damage being increased, compounding with Fire Shield and Fatal Arrow. There's a lot of really nice things that go between those two. So I think that Trey is just one of those characters that just slots really nicely into a great number of parties. Aerith is another one, really solid pick to go with him. Serah now, because of her passive Brave gains and the big attack auras and things like that, but just be careful of obviously debuff overflow when it comes to them, but having the frayed debuffs will actually help Serah out in some ways to keep the 6+ debuffs going. And then finally with artifacts, he has a C50 that increases his offensive stats and he wants attack. Nice and simple, but you want them. So now let's take a look at the Lufenia that's going to come along with Trey's Lost Chapter. And if any of you guys remember when Trey came out the first time around, the Evil Gaze monsters that came along with this were an absolute nightmare due to how fast they were, how immune to various different things they were, the fact that like they just kept going and going and going and attacking you. And they haven't changed all that much in regards to their mechanics. Like, they still put up auras, but the auras themselves have changed slightly. They delay you a lot with their attacks as well, so be very cautious of that. You are encouraged to bring along framed debuffs because they like remove regular ones quite a lot, and to bring off-turn damage because they like to attack you very, very frequently. Now, they also put up a yellow aura, which makes it so they're pretty much immune to all damage. And the only way that you can get through this is to break them. So there's various ways in which you can do that. Obviously, Trey is what they're going for with this. However, he's not the only character that can do that. You have access to Ramza, you have access to Gabranth. You can 100% battery it down, so if you wanted to take Kais or somebody like that, then they have ways of doing it as well. And as a matter of fact, Kais is a massive enabler to just take a launch team and steamroll this event, because not only does he provide the instant, like the gravity, if you wanted to, you could make it so that they never really get a turn, because you can just push through their damage so hard, because their Lufenia Orb is goes up by them taking damage from a debuff. So characters like Kais, again Trey, anyone with a sap or a poison, Serah, if you've managed to pick her up, will work fantastically here. But the orb actually disappears at 30% HP, so if you can butcher their health early through Cloud, Dark Knight Cecil, Kais, Ramza, etc., you can actually just make this really easy for yourself and just punch through all of their damage, make it so that they don't get an orb, and then just delay them to heck and back, and then you'll be fine doing it that way. Alternatively, if you want a different way of cheesing it through, especially if you have Serah, because a character that really benefits from her and her passive auras and stuff like that is El Nash. Terra just locks these guys out pretty much instantly. They just can't do anything. If you bring like El Nash with the ability to lock characters onto him through a call ability, they're just not going to be able to do anything to you. So then you just have to build around their mechanics and their Lufenia Orb, etc. But then Nash's LD saps already, so you don't have to worry about that either. But if you want to do it normally, then you're going to want to have anyone with a poison effect. So if you've got Trey, obviously, the Ultimisia has a sap as well, and is actually pretty fierce for this because of the ability to deny their turns with her burst. Gabranth also triggers it with his counter, despite the fact that it doesn't actually do damage. It's one of those weird ones that we've seen before where Gabranth can kind of trigger it. And because they do a lot of HP attacks as well, you can use Gabranth to mitigate some of that. If they have a red aura, then they get extra speed, and a lot of their attacks start instant breaking you, so you just have to be very, very careful of that. And then Gladio is good in this, but a lot of their attacks also ignore bravery damage reduction, so you're just going to get the counter attack off of impulse and not the actual 0 damage, so just be careful with that. And then once you hit them past 30%, that's the aura that you're going to have to deal with for the rest of the fight. They do also have a blue aura, but you very rarely see it in a lot of clears, because either people are taking like massive amounts of attack or like launch teams and making so they never get to it, or and even if they do, it's just it lowers their stats so that you're actually able to hit them more. But just be careful and let if you can either let them not get a turn whatsoever, or let them take turns and you take advantage of it through off-turn damage. That's the primary ways in which you're going to try and deal with this particular event. So now we come to the big question on, well, both of these banners, I guess, because we're going to now say whether we should or shouldn't pull on these banners. Serah, I'll start with her, is in a much better position than she was originally. I'm personally not going to go too heavily on her at this point in time, because I feel that Trey is more pressing. I think that I'm going to get a lot more use out of him than her, but that is down to the fact that I already have a lot of support-based characters that I already have plans for incoming Lufenias, and having Serah with this increased bravery and HP damage doesn't actually change my plans all that much. If I had gotten her for free, then maybe it would have done, but I don't feel that I absolutely have to have her. It's a very, very nice thing to have, though. Percentile damage is a huge benefit to any character that has it, and therefore other characters in the party will benefit greatly from her. And because she's got such large attack and max bravery buffs as well, They are going to benefit. Her base kit, however, is still absolutely pathetic, quite frankly. Like, the only time she's ever going to deal any kind of damage whatsoever, really, is through her EX. She's got, like, she might cap out occasionally, but she still only has single HP dumps, which, when you've got Cecil or Aerith as people who could take that same slot, and Aerith still has HP damage up. She only has 10%, but therefore it's smaller and doesn't have the bravery increase. But she has a lot of other benefits that make her more preferable to my palette, because she has healing in her kit. She has the ability to shut off all buffs and debuffs from the enemy side altogether. I think that she is more widely usable. However, I do think that Serah's poison debuffs are very strong, and the max bravery down is really good. And therefore, but I mean, one thing I will say as well with her is, because she requires the enemy party to have 6 or more debuffs, if you're against a single enemy, she is not the first character I would take, because having to maintain that through the Lufenia age of enemies that cleanse debuffs as regularly as they do, they buff themselves a lot, and a lot of Serah's debuffs aren't framed, so they're easy to push off. So make sure you support her adequately, both with a really strong damage dealer with multiple HP dumps so that you can take advantage of those as much as you can, and obviously somebody who can benefit her, support her debuffing capabilities rather than grind against them. One thing I will say, though, is that I have been tempted to go in, and I probably will do once Trey's banner has come and gone, if he's been nice to me, quite frankly, because I kind of want to see how much damage I can get Kuja's Seraphic Star to deal with Serah, and maybe Paladin Cecil in the party as well, because I think it will be fun. Now, as for Trey, I honestly have scoured my brain to try and think of reasons not to pull for Trey. There's a lot going for him. There is, he's got off-turn damage coming out of his backside. He's got multiple brave damage percentile increases through his debuffs. His EX and his LD do it. He's got a good call ability. He's got a decent damage output even without the off-turn damage, because of multiple HP dumps on some of his regular attacks. He's just got everything. He was really strong back when the EX came out, and he only had his EX plus, and his LDs literally just compounded everything that he has and multiplied it. It's really good. And while I don't Trey's not a character that a lot of people think of when they think of characters they're excited for. But when I try and think of negatives against Trey to sort of say to people, oh no, maybe you shouldn't pull for this I couldn't really think of many, if I'm honest. Fatal Arrow is an extremely powerful debuff. The ability for anyone in your party to just instant break the enemy is very, very strong. So if you don't have a character like Gabranth or Ramza that has access to instant break, you should absolutely be pulling on Trey. Because no matter how much bravery the enemy gains, and enemy brave gains tend to be quite large in this point in time, just going, nope, back to break, please, is fantastic. And as I've said in my text over on the right-hand side here, Aranea has an absolute field day with Trey. Because it's oh, well, if I can't break them, I can't re-break them, then it's not as fun. Trey just goes, well, now you can. Now you can break things whenever you want. And it's lovely, darling. You carry on. I like the number of characters that Trey just goes with is staggering, because he doesn't take up loads of debuff slots. He doesn't, impede on anyone else's progress. He keeps himself safe, mostly. His raining arrows don't. I think I said that they did, but I meant to say that they didn't. He keeps himself safe bravery-wise pretty often. His LD debuff does it. So therefore, characters like Celes and Firion, fantastic with Trey. Aerith, Onion Knight, because the C65 charges both of his skills up. There's a lot of characters that Trey just works with. So honestly, as somebody who got Ishtola LD relatively early and was planning on using gems on her and then tickets on Trey, I'm starting to wonder if I got it the wrong way round. I think perhaps I might actually use some gems on Trey, because I think I'm going to get a lot more use out of him than I would with others. But the only thing that you do have to bear in mind is, like I said, he does sometimes leave his brave pool empty when you don't want him to. So make sure you plan for that accordingly. Serah, actually fabulous alongside Trey, as long as you keep in mind the framed debuff problem. then, you know, the Fatal Arrow doesn't last all that long. But if you're taking the right characters with him, then you can kind of take advantage of that for yourself and just use delay characters like Aranea or like Kais and just use Lot or Cloud and take advantage of the launch on top of everything else. He just slots in very neatly into a lot of teams, and I think that on its own is worth at least considering some resources. So now, and finally, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether or not you would be pulling on a banner and give your reasons why. So once again, a big thank you goes out to all of my patrons for their votes and their comments. Obviously, I have not made a second one for Serah because she was released this morning, and therefore I haven't had time to make the poll, and expecting people from all over the world to comment that quickly, so sadly there isn't a second one for Serah, but of course we do have one for Trey. Now, I think that Trey's actually pretty fierce, and I'm probably going to, just like I said, spend gems on him, because I'm like, yeah, I think I really want this, and if I got Y'shtola Burst along the way, that would be great, because it would be the first time that I've pulled one in ages. But let's go into the numbers. Only 18% of people said that they were going to use gems on Trey. 62%, however, said that they were going to use over 100 tickets. 10% said less than 100 tickets, and a further 10% of people said that they were skipping him entirely. So I think that, like, again, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that Trey's not a popular character in the same way that, like, Y'shtola is, or even Serah. But I think that people kind of overlook him based on who he is, rather than what his kit actually brings along to the table. So I'm really hoping that I might change a few people's minds on this in a few ways, because I kind of want people to see that there's a lot of benefit to what Trey brings along. Now, Matichiri here says, definitely pulling. This would have been the banner I would have gone in with gems, but since Y'shtola surprised me with a burst, I will be going with just tickets this time. Trey is really fun to play, he has great rotations, and his LD would enhance his trap-based kit even further. Yeah, like, I can't really argue with anything that's said there, apart from the fact that you got Y'shtola Burst and I didn't, but there we go, we'll move on quickly. But other than that, I think that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with what's being said there whatsoever. And then JRPG fan says 100 plus tickets for Trey. Trey's primary purpose in your party is to keep the enemy broken at all times, and he does it exceptionally well. Between his EX debuff allowing anyone to instant break an enemy, the successive off-turn damage from his skill 1, the delayed off-turn damage from his skill 2, and now off-turn damage every enemy turn with his LD, Trey is constantly doing damage. Plus his skill 1 follow-up batteries the party as well. Trey's only downside is his general damage output. While he attacks frequently, those attacks don't always hit super hard. Pair him with a strong attack up battery support unit, however, and he can practically melt most enemies. Just make sure you're always using the level 2 version of his skills. His LD makes his rotation easier to manage by having additional attacks available. Yes, absolutely, 100% agree with everything that is said here. I think that his damage output's actually okay. The potency on his attacks could be a little higher, but because of the fact that we have so many characters that can increase damage output, Serah being an absolutely fabulous example of it. If you've got Serah, you're probably going to want Trey just for somebody to take advantage of those like amazing auras that she's got. And then you could also take Paladin Cecil along, because then he's got it even bigger and has the healing down pat. I keep talking and I keep convincing myself to stop pulling for Serah, and I need to not do that. But I think that, like, yeah, I just think everything that's said here is absolutely valid. If I haven't said it already, just be sure that you're using the charge 2 versions of his skills, and then, like, you know, having the LD and his C65 is a turn in which he's not using his other skills, so therefore they're going to level up, which is fantastic. And then Fantendo here says, yes, with gems. Not only is Trey my favourite Type 0 character, he's one of the good ones to boot. I love trap characters, and Trey's playstyle is very fun. Along with his strong as your EX debuff, instant auto-breaking any enemy with bravery no matter how high, his off-turn DPS being great too, with his LD giving him yet another trap to help him further. A lot of people overlooked him because he was right before the burst era, but I can't wait to use my favourite archer again. I don't know if people did overlook him when he first came out because of the burst era being approaching. I tried to get him the first time round and I couldn't get his EX, and I actually got it in the free pull recently, like the golden ticket one. I got a Trey EX in that, so that's made my life a little bit easier. So I'm not sure whether I want to go in with tickets or gems on this banner, so I might need a little bit of advice on this one from you guys. So comment below if you think that Trey is tickets or gems worthy. You guys have seen what my resources look like. You guys let me know. And then finally, Atoy Project says, I'm skipping. I've not played Type 0 and I don't really have an affinity for its characters. I've basically skipped all Type 0 characters in DFFOO, which has made their events some of the most fun to clear, as I need to get it done without the character the challenge is built around. Trey's event was a blast to solve without in the last time, and I'm really looking forward to trying to do it again. I really like this mentality of skipping characters in order to make your mentality different about the event itself. I always try to recommend, whenever I put up my example teams, they never, or very, very, very rarely, have synergy characters unless I know they're characters that everyone is pulling for. So I think it's really fun to try and formulate alternative methods of getting around the mechanics, but luckily with this one, there's actually quite a few ways of doing it. So if you feel that you can get by without Trey, then do so. There's no reason why you couldn't. So that's going to be it for today's video. It's a bit of a long one, but we had a lot to cover with Serah jumping up out of nowhere and deciding, hey, I'm better now. And then obviously Trey having quite a complex but very efficient and fun kit as well. But thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. I do have Final Fantasy IV happening this evening, so definitely come along for that. And like I said before, I do have a week off this week. I will be posting my Waka video very, very soon in the near future, but I'm going to make that in advance so that I have a few days to myself. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you very much for joining me once again, and I will see you then. Take care.